Thank you. All right, my people, good afternoon, good morning. We are so happy you are with us tonight. My name is Victor Davila, and on behalf of the AIGA Design Educators Community Steering Committee, I'd like to welcome you to what promises to be another amazing DEC virtual event. If you can in the chat, again, go ahead and let us know where you're joining us from and how you found out about the event. Again, it will help us know which communication is working. And please take a moment to mute your mics until it's time for you to ask a question. In case you don't know, the DEC is a group of volunteers who create programming to showcase, support, and celebrate design educators in K-12 higher ed and design programs everywhere. We seek to enhance the abilities of design educators and educational institutions to prepare future designers for excellence. We are part of AIGA, the Professional Association for Design, whose mission is advancing design as a professional craft, strategic advantage, and vital cultural force. And just as a heads up, on Friday, November 17th, we have our next virtual event with one of our speakers tonight. We will be welcoming Ellen Lupton, everyone's type mom, to speak about how educators can use social media to complement their curriculum. If you follow Ellen on Instagram, you've no doubt seen her awesome videos cleverly explaining typography and design principles, videos that I will admit that I've borrowed heavily from in my own classes. So we look forward to seeing you then. So to kick off tonight's event, it's my honor and pleasure to introduce tonight's moderator. She's an associate professor and department chair of the Department of Art and Design at Tennessee State University. She's a designer, she's an author, a design researcher, a past DEC committee member, and editor, most recently of the book that we will be discussing tonight. Please welcome Kaleena Sales.
Thank you so much for the introduction and for this opportunity to be here. I'm so excited. I'm actually going to start by passing the microphone or the virtual microphone to Cheryl Miller, just to give a brief welcome and introduction before we jump into the origins of the book. So Auntie Cheryl, if you can.
Listen, good evening, everybody. Good afternoon, wherever you are zooming in from. And it is quite an honor to be before you this evening and to the launch of Kaleena's book, which I'm most excited about. She wanted me to kind of give you a brief history note, and then I will, and try to pass it very quickly so we can talk about the book. This is an incredible time for publishing, especially for the BIPOC community of scholars. Long story short, in my own scholarship and work, I gleaned from W.E.B. Du Bois, who wrote about the slave artisan, and along my way, I found this history book was written in 1976, The Other Slaves, and two scholars, let's see, James Newton and Ronald Lewis. You can't even find the book. And we're just, as BIPOC scholars and designers, design publishing hasn't been our friend. And I was just at the AIGA meeting conference in New York, and I was so happy that I had an opportunity to share space with my peers, because in my space of performance in New York City, I was the 1%. And, I stood with Mike Root and Steve Heller, and, we were all peers the same time together. And we just were underrepresented and not published. And I was going around with Me Too, and the Dorothy Hayes cadre. We were designers there at the same time. And what's so exciting is that since 2020, for, I guess, a season of let's grow and change together, publishing has opened up an opportunity for design scholars, our design scholars, our Black and Indigenous BIPOC designers, to be published. And I'm humbled. I'm one of the first that I have a footnote that seems to resound through all of the books, which is important in terms of understanding the purpose of scholarship, and especially if you're an academic and a professor. We want to write. And I have a print review coming out shortly, where I'm reviewing the five, I say, essential BIPOC publications that are dropping this month. And it's quite exciting because it's never happened for us. And so I want to start by saying, I have a little JPEG floating around on LinkedIn and Instagram. If you want to know what that bibliography could look like for your syllabus, go to Instagram and you'll see a picture of at least 9 of the books that are current since 2020 that I recommend. And the one, I have to admit, I have 2, but the one I love, oh my God, I love Centered. And I have so many. I'm going to leave you with this anecdote and this story. One is designed so well. It is so yummy. It's design candy. And one of the backstory to the cover and the essay is for Adolphus Washington. Adolphus Washington. He's on page 86, chapter 6, Collage and the Black American Aesthetic. Well, on Instagram, he's called Negrophonic. And so I'm like, who in the world is on Instagram talking about Negrophonic? I said, I was a Negro baby. There's nobody out there knows what Negrophonic is. And I found Adolphus. And when I found him and I went to his Instagram, I said, Negrophonic, what are you doing? And these beautiful, absolutely designed, gorgeous Romare Bearden type collages. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these are gorgeous. And I didn't know who he was. And so I started, I Instagrammed him and messaged and got his backstory and just started putting his collages on LinkedIn and, and on Instagram. And Kaleena found him, and he has a beautiful story. Believe it or not, he works for the State Department in London. He's from New York City. And has been inspired by the Negrophonic lifestyle and our story, and Romare Bearden and collage. And his advocacy is he does the collages at home and on his way, but he works for the State Department in London. And I got to know him and started reposting. And Kaleena found him. And what a delightful surprise to find his typography, his essay, and the cover they designed together. She can better tell you that story. There's so many wonderful. I can continue, Trey, and I can talk so much about the scholars. What's really important that I want our academic community to know: no one has done us a favor in publishing us. These are top publishers, and to be a scholar in this hour and trade publishing to launch out and publish our scholarship. I'm having and signing all of my books when I share this space, read and use. My goal is growth, that we will use these books. We'll use Kaleena's book, because it's so diverse and it's so gorgeous. It's just yummy all around. That we integrate a reading, component in our syllabus and use the book, and not just buy it for the first 90 days and it'll be a Christmas present. I'm actually going to use the book as required reading and develop projects and deliverables for my courses. And so I throw it back to you, Kaleena. Tell us about this yummy book. And, I love this one. And so I'll be back at you when she gets, do me last. I'll be back to talk about the last essay. And that's your history lesson. Kaleena, congratulations.
Thank you.
And may we use the book on our syllabus over and over again.
Thank you so much. You are a treasure. And I just wanted to make sure that we gave you some space. So I will share my screen and get started. I know we are trying to cover a lot in a short amount of time. So let's see if I can get this full screen. All right, so what I'd love to do, speaking of Romare Bearden, can you all see my screen okay? Okay, great. So I'll do a brief overview of the book and the origins of the book, and then get into a few questions for the contributors that are here. We have an incredible panel, and I'd love to make sure that we have space to hear from them, and then hopefully have enough time at the end to answer questions from the audience. And so I start here. These are images that I share with my students and that I talk about sometimes when I think about the origins of my own work and my own interest in this topic. And so I teach design at Tennessee State University in Nashville, Tennessee. TSU is an HBCU, a historically Black college and university. And so I teach mostly Black students who are navigating their way into art and design spaces. And a lot of my students, like myself, come from urban minority environments. A lot of my students are from Memphis, Chicago, Atlanta. And so in thinking about their visual environments growing up and their sort of aesthetic preferences, um, I've gathered some images that really point to the colors, the textures, and the sort of visual information that informs a lot of the students that I teach their visual aesthetics. And so in researching Black visual culture, I'm influenced by, and I teach my students about artists like Romare Bearden, as was mentioned by Auntie Cheryl, and the work of Adolphus, who did the cover design. I'm influenced by collage artists like Romare Bearden or Basquiat or Emory Douglas or Say Adams or Afrocobra. Artists like these who have really found a way to be inspired by the communities in which they come from, and who are doing work that's really works outside of canonical narratives and what we are typically taught in art and design classrooms. If you go to school for design, like many of us know, as many of us are design educators, we teach about Swiss design, we teach about international typographic style, Bauhaus, modernism, and we teach that typically through the lens of simple compositions, sans serif typefaces, flat colors, logic over emotion. But there's so many additional narratives that exist across the world and in different communities and cultures. There's in these other cultural narratives, there can be uh, complex compositions or expressive, ornate, or bold typefaces, a preference for texture and layers, and a preference for symbolism and iconography over some of the Swiss design styles that we typically teach from. And so this is what informs my research interest, because there's a tension that exists between what we're teaching our students and what really exists out there in the world. And so through my service on AIGA's Design Educators Community Steering Committee, I proposed a writing series that really highlighted underrepresented cultural and social groups who have contributed to art and design in some way, and who have been sort of really eclipsed by dominant design movements. I love this quote over on the left from an Afrocobra artist. And it says, rather than squeezing into the canon, let's make the canon more elastic so that it includes what we do and who we are. And so that's really what roots a lot of the work that I do and what began this Beyond the Bauhaus series. And so for that series, I wrote the first very, very brief essay about West African Adinkra symbols, and then a second essay about Afrocobra and how they define their own aesthetic, which was a really eye-opening sort of research experience for me. And then from there began to open up this series to contributors and really received some lovely essays from a range of design educators. Some of them are shown here, and many of them are in the book that we're discussing today. And so this series is really what roots the book that we're talking about today. I pitched a proposal to Princeton Architectural Press that was titled Beyond the Bauhaus. And it's directly inspired by this series. And over time, the title changed into Centered: People and Ideas Diversifying Design. Earlier today, I shared a post on social media talking about the title for this book, and it's really not about, centering in the sense of establishing a hierarchy where one group is above another group. It's really about sort of this restructuring, this recalibration, in search for balance in the way that we discuss design histories, in the way that we include additional narratives and additional cultures in our conversations about design. And it's about honoring various value systems and not sort of believing that one narrative exists for all. Um, this is these are all the contributors to the book. I am blown away that everyone said yes. I wanted to include people in this book who were doing incredible research on their own, and we're also representatives from various cultural groups from around the world. And I'm honored, I'm blown away that I'm in the midst of, all of these people. So yeah, I'm gonna move on. I know we are short on time. So here's a preview of the contents of the book. There's a range of perspectives. What I love about what's included is that we're looking at, the Giesman quilters, who are a group of women from Alabama, and we're also looking at the work of women in Morocco, and we're looking at women in or the work of Kurdish pattern making and the truck art of India. And so there's a diverse and really wide breadth of experiences that are being included. And most of these stories are not typically sort of discussed in, again, traditional design classrooms. So I'll sort of stop my my rambling, and I'd love to turn it over to some of the contributors and allow them to talk about their respective essays or interviews within the book. Steve Child co-wrote the first chapter in the book about the Giesman quilters, and I would love for him to give some insight into his research and what he learned during the research, and then also what he would love to communicate, or what's the largest sort of takeaway from that particular essay. So Steve, if you can unmute, or I don't know.
Yeah, I think
I
I'm,
need to stop here.
yeah,
Okay, great.
thanks, Kaleena. And I can really thank you for having done this, because it came out of a conversation we had. I invited Kaleena to speak to one of my classes, or my school, actually. And we somehow got in a conversation. I mentioned the Giesman quilters because they're some of my favorites. And so then I thought I'd write the website thing. And anyway, it evolved. But I can just say my wife introduced me to the Giesman quilters many years ago, and immediately I loved it. And I really felt strongly about it, which I don't often do. I'm a fine artist. I was trained as a fine artist. I came through design, through the industry. Actually, I had to make a living. So Romary Bearden was one of my favorite artists, and I did a lot of collage. So I really liked the rhythm and the dynamics of these pieces and their organic quality. But on a much deeper level, I really respond to the spirit of these things. And as you dig deeper into the history of these quilts and where they came from, to me, it's all about, it's born of necessity and of literally having nothing. They cut up these pieces of cloth that were throwaways, and they made something out of it. And they're just fantastic pieces. And they didn't have any introduction to modernism. So that's what's really unusual, is that I can put a Paul Klee painting next to theirs. Paul Klee was a violinist also, and very concerned with rhythm and music making, and to these, and I see a lot of similarities. So, and I just wanted to share that with everybody. That's as simply, I'm not a historian. I'm not much of a writer, actually. I had to work really hard at it, but I really wanted to share this work with everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I think one thing that you just mentioned, much like the need to diversify the canon, aesthetically through design, I think writing needs to be diversified as well. And so in approaching this book, I originally thought, we'll have essays of equal length. All of them will be 3,500 words. They'll all be this particular format. And then very quickly in sort of receiving what was written, I realized that there needed to be a diversity in the format and the style as well. And so I hope that all of the authors and contributors' voices are coming through, and that there's a diversity within that as well. I feel like the Black Experience in Design book did a really, really excellent job of nailing that format that honors different styles. And yeah, so the canon needs to be sort of elasticized in many different ways, but I think that including different voices and formats in the writing is one way to do that. And so I appreciate your perspective and your research here. And anyone that's not familiar with Gee's Bend Quilters, one, read the essay, and then also can do some additional work. Their work is gorgeous. All right, so I'm going to move on for sake of time. We don't just kind of quickly show some of the content here. Yijun and Casper co-wrote an essay on Chinese typographic archive. Will you share a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we both I think are fascinated by, well, just East Asian typography in general. But I think that, for both of us, when we're looking at Chinese type, and to just kind of summarize it in 30 seconds, what we find very interesting about it is that it provides a very different starting point for people who are used to thinking about written language as something that is phonetic and that is alphabetic and is limited in size, right? Like say 26 letters of the alphabet. And to kind of think about it from another perspective of seeing language as being infinite, of being highly complex, highly modular, and that type of idea of conceiving of a language that is, to put it very crassly, on the other side of the spectrum. I think for both of us, when we see it and look at it, gives us a lot of different possibilities and ways of thinking about how language can be used, and ultimately how that affects graphic design. And for us too, right, we always work with typography in graphic design, and so actually interrogating the fundamental building blocks of it really then sets the foundation for thinking about graphic design in new and interesting ways. The second part of this, oh yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh no, I was just saying, yeah, absolutely. Also, it's interesting because just on a day-to-day level, designers who use type, but as faculty, I think we think a lot about how can studying history really empower our students to make today. And we really think of the act of collecting as kind of the flip side of making. You kind of, by understanding precedent, you can kind of ground yourself in the history of ideas, and you can react to it, you can rebel, you could go along with it, but it's part of being just an informed maker. And so when we created the Chinese type archive, it was really to create a resource for educators around the world. It was a place to put Chinese typographic terms related to Chinese, just listing out all the typefaces that are out there, and also kind of books about Chinese type and linking it to WorldCat so you could find where it is in your local library. That this was just really we considered it kind of a living typographic index for students and educators around the world, and a way to also build community and build bridges with people who teach design, also in other areas of the world.
Thank you both. And you had, who did the graph or the illustrations here? Did you all have?
Yeah, our research assistants also helped us with these graphics, Stephanie Winarto and Mac Wang. So, and they've been working with us for quite some time. So we really are really fortunate to have some great hands.
Yeah, they're really beautiful, and I think they just did a really wonderful job of helping us to understand. So well done. I'm going to move on for sake of time. Sorry. Sadie. So the book is sort of a combination of essays and interviews, and it weaves in and out. I think the format is like 2 essays in an interview, 2 essays in an interview. And so Sadie agreed to an interview, and we met over Zoom for a couple of hours and talked about design, and I learned a lot from her. And so I'd love to hear her talk a little bit about um, her interview, and if there's anything that you wanted to share.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, super thankful and appreciate being part of this. So a little bit of a context of where I'm coming from. So I currently teach at OCAD University here in Toronto. But one of the reasons of being out of the States is that this is the only place that is building an Indigenous graphic design program. Like, you can't find that in the States, you can't find that in Mexico. So a lot of this is just kind of, or I should say, a lot what I loaded onto Kaleena is kind of filtering out of how we're kind of bridging historical graphic design before the printing press in North America into a context where the terminology around graphic design theory is, I guess, similar in a way. So the first thing that I mentioned that I said to Kaleena was, anytime that I speak at a conference, do a workshop, come into a classroom, I never know somebody's competency level of Native American culture. And again, depending on where you are at in the United States, you might be closer to maybe more Indigenous communities, not, you may have never seen an Indigenous person before. So I think what was super helpful in being interviewed by Kaleena was, I don't know, am I giving a response or kind of sharing a lot of this design work in the realm of if someone doesn't know anything about Native American or Indigenous culture, or in thinking about whoever's hands this book might be in, do they know a little bit? So what was super helpful in that interview process was Kaleena just preferencing specific details on those questions. So the main things I wanted to share in the interview was, when we learn as graphic design students about graphic design history, some of the main things that we learn about is semiotics. And I was explaining to Kaleena that before, I guess 1400s or before the printing press, Indigenous people had a form of documentation in the form of semiotics and the means of a lot of inventions around recording devices. But part of that is in the means of, I guess, recording history or finding patterns in history, but then also knowing that a lot of people really like symbolism and patterns, but may not be able to decipher them. So kind of explaining that concept of, if we have a history where we didn't have paper, pens, crayons, marquee sharpers, maybe paintbrushes here and there, how were we actually creating visuals, symbols to document? It was more on a grid. So gridding between weaving, beading, working with porcupine quills, rug making, pottery, and thinking about when you're creating imagery in that grid structure, a lot comes out as maybe a little bit more form of a symbolism instead of icon. So the piece that Kaleena is showing here is, if I was going to explain or kind of highlight with the Lakota, Dakota, Great Plains visual style for my students who are just learning the visual language of the prairie or the grasslands, if I wanted to kind of create a poster or maybe like a little infographic in our visual language of the importance of the buffalo. So meaning that as Indigenous people, we're always saying we're protectors of some land form. So if I'm coming into the space saying that I'm the protector of the prairie, one of the main things that I'm going to advocate for is the buffalo. The buffalo is a key component in keeping the soil alive. And then thinking about, if you understand those values, that knowledge, and I guess the importance of ecosystems, it might enhance the competency of how you might read symbols or kind of decipher a lot of that visual language and pattern form that comes with a lot of landscapes, land tropes, florals, and those aspects. So again, Kaleena, thank you for the invite. Love the book. And again, I just appreciate being a part of the conversation with everybody on here.
Thank you. I was blown away by our conversation, and it really, one of the goals of this book, and I think everyone sort of like contributes to it in a really different and unique way, is I think through the essays and through the interviews, we get a chance to see or learn more about the cultural, social, political context that surrounds the making of the work. And so what I didn't want, and was for this just to be a book of pictures where people are sort of flipping through and doing oohs and ahs, but not really understanding the value systems and sort of belief systems that inform the making of the work. And so yeah, we had a really, I think, beautiful conversation, and I think that comes through, and I know that I walked away understanding more about the responsibility to the land, and in a way that I hadn't considered before. And so I think that's one of the goals of this entire project. And I think, again, I think it's achieved in different ways. So let's see. All right, Elaine, if
Hi.
you want to share, if you can share a little bit about your essay, and anything that you would like, to be the takeaway here.
Sure. Yeah. I was so grateful that you asked me to write this because it's something I've been thinking about for a long time, especially as folks continue to bring in more diverse sources into their classrooms. This actually happened to me as a student where we received an essay to read around the OSPAL posters, these Cuban posters that were made during the Cuban Revolution. And I remember feeling upset as a student that there wasn't more context around these posters that are aesthetically beautiful and definitely worth studying, but also came with a lot of baggage politically, culturally, emotionally. So this piece is sort of an opportunity to tie those pieces together, especially with current political movements that are happening in Cuba. Everybody recognizes this iconic image of Che Guevara. And in the essay, I sort of talk about the origins of this image, and also the fact that it was used. It became popular during his funeral. And during that funeral, Fidel Castro gave a speech where he used the phrase "patria or muerte," which means homeland and death, homeland or death, which now currently has been sort of re-owned by the people of Cuba, and changed to homeland and life, to sort of show the current struggle of the people in Cuba towards liberation, and that they don't want to die for their country, they actually want to live. So this essay sort of goes back to the origins of that phrase and ties it together with current songs and the current struggle that people in Cuba are facing. And I think we should still appreciate these posters and definitely include them in the design canon, but also understand sort of the context of what these posters, when these posters were made, and what they represent to certain people, so that we don't run across issues in classrooms where you're talking about these works and in the service of diversifying and expanding the canon, but then also causing potential harm to students who may have fled this communist regime, or whose families may have experienced a lot of strife. So it's all just in service of providing a little bit more context about this specific topic.
Thank you. Yeah, that was I mean, that was definitely my biggest takeaway from your essay. It was just that sometimes there's not like a really neat and beautiful like history that's attached to the making of work, and that's important to share as well. It's critical to have that understanding, again, so that we're not just sort of honoring the aesthetics on surface for surface value, but that we're really looking deeper and understanding how it impacts community and the sort of legacy of liberation and all of that connected to it as well. So thank you. Let's see. All right, Shantanu, if you want to share a little bit, if you can, a little bit about your essay and your contribution.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Hi, everyone. So my essay is about the truck art of India. It's in essence, it's basically automobile decoration. It happens in so many different countries. And the trucks in India, these are just handmade and hand painted. And this has been going on. To be honest, I did this research in 2011 and 12. So back then it was about 70 years old. I actually couldn't find people who had actually started this because they had long been deceased, and the next generations were working in this profession. So now I would say it was probably 80 to 85 years old. So again, like before I did this project, there was little to no documentation on this project. And the way I see this is the trucks, it's almost like a slice of life. It's all the truckers or the truck owners, they in different forms, whether it's typography or visuals, they share information about their life, family, beliefs, their religion, political views, so many different kinds of things. And the truck art form, it like within India, like if you go from north to south or east to west, the style keeps changing. It's not uniform. So it's as diverse as like India itself and the people within the country. Um, the interesting thing for me was like, I mean, when I looked at this art form, to me, it looked like already like a documentation of their life. And so for me, it felt like documenting the documentation. Um, and this wasn't intended, at least for me, but I was documenting all of this like a means of like photographs, and I had a handy cam, and back then iPhone 4S was like the new thing, so I was using that. And it wasn't an intentional decision, but we had a lot of data, and we realized that we could. And when I say I had a team working with me, we made a documentary film. I did most of the documentation along with a couple of friends, and then I worked with some people that I knew to make a documentary film. So if you're interested, the documentary film is available on Vimeo or YouTube for free. It's called Horn Please. And one last thing that I wanted to share about this essay was like, I mean, when Kaleena asked me, and thank you so much, Kaleena, for asking me to contribute to this book. I mean, it's an amazing privilege. Like, but when you asked me, I was wondering like, why would someone ask me to write an essay about this? Especially because there's already a documentary film, and it has been out for a while. But then the more I thought about it, I realized that the documentary film was me telling someone's story, like all the artists and the truck owners and truck painters. Whereas this essay is a little bit of their story as well as my own experience and my story working on this project. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think when I first encountered your work, I was sort of upset that I'd never I wasn't familiar with anything about Indian truck art, and that's one of the issues with as Cheryl spoke to earlier about sort of the history of design publication and what happens when there's that dominant narrative that sort of gets retold and told again and again. There's so many incredible stories and histories that just aren't shared, and so yours is certainly yours, not just yours, but like the this work is valuable and it has certainly blown me away, and I think it's that's absolutely why I asked you to write the essay. I was just like, this is incredible, and then your photography is gorgeous as well. So thank you so much. All right, I haven't been looking at the chat. I don't know if anyone has questions. Okay, good. All right, so I think we're doing okay on time. Let's see. Dina, if you want to share next.
Yes, thank you so much, Kaleena, for having me in this book. Like everyone said, it's really a privilege. There are multiple things that interested me in doing this research. Well, one of them is really just being fascinated by design histories, and I wanted to learn more about the histories in my own country. And so I grew up with things surrounding me like these, but not fully understanding what they were because no one taught anything to me. And then when I started researching this, it was always narrated from a male perspective, a white male perspective. And they were not designers, they were ethnographers. And so it's interesting to see how it's been orientalized and, like in a way that does a big disservice to actually the craft. And then another point is when I studied design, anything that was craft was not, you know, valuable enough to be part of the canon. And so that felt, you know, kind of sad to me because they invented a visual language and system that survived years of colonization and patriarchy. And these stories are weaved in a way that that is so feminist. Like in nature, it's a collaborative craft, and then the symbols and what they're translating in these stories are feminist in nature. And I really wanted to capture these voices and tell that story from a North African perspective rather than a male ethnographer perspective. And so this research started with me just simply trying to contact the ENU, which is an e-commerce platform who work with Amazigh weavers who are indigenous to North Africa. And their goal was to create a system where they can earn 100% of their profit rather than going through a middleman who earns 96% of their profit and leave them with 4%. And so I emailed them for an entire year to just have a conversation. And finally, I got in. And finally, I was able to co-design workshops and meet the, you know, women weavers and talk about them, about these stories. And they went to their villages and they like asked about, you know, what these symbols meant to their members of the community. And they came back and they shared those stories with me. And then, you know, I started just documenting all this. And Kaleena asked me to write an essay about it, and ta-da! And I guess one of the main takeaways is that research, especially when we're studying design histories that were not taught or, you know, written or published previously in the canon, we need to listen to indigenous people. We need to listen to people who actually are experts in their own craft and design, who have inspired like this. They inspired like European architects and designers and weavers who are famous, like Paul Klee, for example, but no one knows of any of these weavers. So I guess that's one of the main takeaways, is really listening to people who are doing actively the craft and designing it.
Thank you. There's so much I want to say, but yes, I think that what this essay does is it again helps to honor people. And it's not, again, it's about this beautiful design, but it's really about the people and that have been overlooked and ignored and not included. And so, you know, I should say, you know, there are only 13 chapters in this book. So this is certainly not a comprehensive survey of, you know, of design histories or contributions from around the world. But what I hope is that it at least is a sampling of that reminds us of what we don't know and what stories exist that we've not been told, and you know what else is out there that needs to be researched and discovered. I love that you have the photos of the women that you interviewed and that were doing this work. And yeah, I hope that throughout all of these essays and interviews that people feel seen and valued. Okay, I'm going to move on. And I do have one really sort of quick thing to add to Dina's thing. This book would not have happened without Dina. I just want to say that she actually emailed me. I had sort of thought about pitching Beyond the Bauhaus as a book. And then I was stalling out. I was just like, I don't know, have time. I don't know that I'll be able to do it. And then Dina sent me a random email, I think, and it was like, I had a dream that you wrote a book about Beyond the Bauhaus and it was going to be great. And I was like, okay, I guess I have to do I guess I have to do that now. So so yeah, I just wanted to share that as well. All right. We have, I think, 2 more before we can maybe take some questions. And if anyone has questions and wants to drop it into the chat, please please do that. All right. So Ellen, I reached out to Ellen because, I think that it's so important to also weave in some of the stories that we are taught and then figure out, what we don't know, what has been also left out from some of those dominant canonical narratives. And so the essay with Ellen did exactly that. So if you want to unmute and share.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kaleena. Well, one of the things I've learned from you is this expression, stretching the canon. And I think we can include canonical design in expanded design histories, but we have to look at it in less monolithic ways. So when I was a student, many years ago, I thought of the Bauhaus as like a thing, like a monument that existed and was this kind of impenetrable orb. And over the years, as I've studied the Bauhaus, you see that it was a fractured place and that there was all kinds of conflict at the Bauhaus, conflict between generations, the young coming in and upsetting the status quo of the school. There are many immigrants at the Bauhaus, both as faculty and students. And I think of my own graduate program, which is full of students from all over the world. And the Bauhaus was like not just Germans, it was a diverse place. And there were women at the Bauhaus who really struggled to be seen and to make their contribution, and their contributions were huge, sometimes buried, sometimes acknowledged, but there would be no Bauhaus without those women. And there'd be no Bauhaus without African art, because constructivism, which became the most famous language at the Bauhaus, had a direct link through Cubism to African aesthetics. So I think we can stretch the Bauhaus and talk about it in ways that are a lot more interesting and a lot more real in terms of what happened at that amazing, weird, messed up, imperfect moment in history. So thanks for including that story, Kaleena.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your research and writing there. I do think it's important to expand what we think we know about history, and to underscore those characters, those people, those communities that weren't documented in the original sort of telling of that. And so I appreciate your contribution very much. All right, and last but not least, is Cheryl Miller. You want to share a little bit about your contribution, and then after you're done, I think we can open it up for any questions from the audience. And Cheryl, I don't see everyone on my grid. Let's see. Oops.
Once again, I want to thank Kaleena for curating us and pulling us into this publishing moment. I'm very, very excited, Kaleena. I'm going through the book again, and now I'm hearing from your contributors. This will be required reading, and I've already gotten my request from UT's bookstore and so forth. So what books are you going to use next semester? And so this one will work perfectly for my course. I'm the last essay here, and I think it rounds out the conversation, because not only is it about a diverse student population that has come upon us that we have to deal with, it's about us as educators. And sometimes I know my truth telling is raw, but truth is truth. And it's not so always easy to make the medicine go down. And I think that in this hour, to sugarcoat things that I know have a truthful backstory doesn't help us grow together as a community. I have this class that has been developed out of, I had a chance with University of Texas School of Design and Creative Technologies during pandemic And they gave me an opportunity to develop a class. Now, I was locked down in COVID, and I said, you know what? I want to redo the canon. I guess I did. And I said, all right, I know how I studied. I know how I studied, and I've got, an academic semester of 12, 13 weeks to unpack a new story. And I researched all the way from the beginning, where we all start if we're teaching design history, and each chapter has been a lecture, and I developed this class. The essay uniquely falls in line with now the course. I think will be launched next week as continuing ed, and you can get a badge from UT Texas. So that if you're interested in upticking your CV to say that you've got some decolonizing and DEI, new CEU you're learning, you can take the class, and this class now has legs. It's crazy, but I'm with 4 universities now. And I teach this class hybrid. We've worked it out and developed all of this, being able to teach and reach everyone through the pandemic. And it seems to be working in partnership. The essay really talks about the importance. I give you really raw data, why the student body has changed, why this is something that we need to grow together. And more importantly, as UT Austin has worked to put the course in e-learning, it will help each of us to expand our thinking. It's a writing class, and at UT Austin, it is a writing, what they call a writing flag course. And basically, yes, you will learn my story of being a Black designer over and against, the timeline of the canonical history that we all have studied and we teach. But it's just an example. I don't require anyone to remember any of my history. It's a writing class to be able to tell your story. And so my essay really speaks to the importance, data, facts, figures, of how we are different and our demographic is different. And we're going to be left behind if we don't accept the truth of it. So enjoy my essay, which kind of summarizes that I think it's important for all of us to use every story in this book. To use this book, I'm going to make it required reading on my bibliography. And if you're interested in taking the class, if you see this code, you can find the QR code on my Instagram account. They're going to be releasing registration information. It's just to click and say you want to see when the course is being launched. And so it's pretty, I couldn't have planned it together, the course and the publication, but it's so important because we have to be competitive in this hour as educators, and our student demographic wants these stories, and they want us to tell them the truth of it. So that's what I have for us today. And I want to thank all of you for being here. We're going to take some questions. Kaleena's going to lead us out. And I really do want to applaud the book is beautiful. It is so inviting. Princeton Architectural has done a beautiful job. It's designed well, and it's extremely welcoming, the pictures and the stories. So I'd love for you all to join me in contacting your bookstore and using it, finding new ways to make projects and required readings. Kaleena, thank you so much for having us all.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. And very quickly, I know we are close to time, but I do want to mention and honor the other contributors as well, and just sort of show just this page here that gives a little bit of insight into some of the images and work that was included. So that I won't forget anyone. who's not here. Nuveen wrote chapter 5. She's actually her chapter is titled Kurdish Fragments, Mapping Pattern as Language, and she's actually a TSU graduate. She's an alum of our program, and she also teaches in my department as an adjunct instructor. So I know her well. She's incredible, and her story that she contributed in this book is particularly meaningful because it talks about how the experiences of the Kurdish people really informed her aesthetic, and I just it's an essay worth reading. So I just want to make sure to mention that. And then Saki Mafandikwa, he contributed his time and did a really beautiful interview with me and talked about Zimbabwe and just those of you that know Saki know his spirit and know like how incredible he is. And so that comes through, I think, in the way that he speaks and sort of his pacing and all of that. And his story is beautiful. And actually he sort of, I don't think he would mind. It's written in the book anyway, but he sort of teared up at the end of the interview and it points to the heart and sort of his, again, how much he cares about the work that he does. And so I want to make sure to shout him out as well. Zupong did a really fun interview that we titled Razzle Dazzle, Color and Identity. He is a Chinese designer, and he talked about his origins growing up in China from a really kind of colorful city, and then coming to New York, where he described it as like drab and gray, and figuring out how to sort of make that work. And if you follow Zupong on Instagram, his work is incredibly vibrant and beautiful, and it speaks to his spirit and community. And then there's an interview with Trey Sales of Vocal Type, and just that highlights the important work that he's doing. And I think that's everyone, including all of the beautiful voices that are here today. And then I do want to very quickly say thank you to a friend of mine, Dr. Tiffany Green, who helped me with some early editing before sending it to the publisher, and also to Sarah at Princeton Architectural Press, who was incredibly patient with me as we were going through the editing process. And then again to the contributors who really makes this book really special, and helps, I hope that it helps to make people feel seen and understood and welcomed into the design community in a way that I don't think that our industry has been particularly good at in the past. And so I hope that this book serves as a resource for design educators and students and anyone who is entering into this space, so that we can be more pluralistic in the way that we talk about design and include voices from a really genuine way. And so I think that's all that I have. I will stop my share. Let's see. I think I hit the right button. Let's see. Uh-oh, I can't see anything now. Can you guys see the?
Yeah, we see you.
Oh, okay, great. Sorry, it took a while for it to go away on my end. We are at time, but I'm happy to stick around if there's any. I forgot to mention something really important. Anyone interested in purchasing the book? I am supporting Matter, Rick Griffith's bookstore, Rick and Deborah's bookstore. And so I would love to send you there if you're interested in purchasing the book. For those of you that have already purchased, thank you so much for doing so. I really hope that you enjoy it. And so, yeah, if there's any time or if anyone has a quick question, I'm happy to stay around. If you need to leave, completely understand that. And I thank you so much for joining, but I'm happy to stick around and answer a couple of questions if there are any from the audience. So thank you so much.
Kaleena, I have a question for you that I put in the chat, but I was just thinking that
Okay.
this book contains amazing stories and essays. It seems like rife for sequels and more editions and volumes. And I was just wondering, I know you're probably just kind of like taking a breather, chilling out after this one is finally done, but have you considered where to take this after the fact with possibly more stories and more essays and more unique insights to different cultures and backgrounds?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think there's room for that. I don't know for sure what will happen, but it's crossed my mind. I think that I would love for there to be more essays. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it's a second edition of the book or if it comes in another format, if there's other ways to sort of do that. But it's something I've thought about. I'll say that. Yeah.
I'll ask you again in a few months after
Okay.
you
Yeah.
let everything settle
Ask me
down.
late spring. We'll see at the end of the semester.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for anyone that's sticking around? No other questions? Okay. Well, a huge, round of applause for the contributors. Thank you so much for your important work. I'm super excited that we're finally here at Publication Day. Feels like a kind of a long window of time, but hopefully it's worthwhile. And I really appreciate everyone. So thank you so much. And I will see you all out on social media or hopefully in person.